And especially considering the danger. I mean, look at this. Now, this is a Vanity Fair story with the headline, "The Capitol attack is looking more and more like a right-wing plot. New reports indicate the Proud Boys and possibly some Republican lawmakers, like Boebert, are being criticized for their role in organizing the attack. In the fallout over the Capitol attack earlier this month, some of the rioters have attempted to downplay their involvement, saying they were merely caught up in the moment. I just got swept up in the moment, guys." Really quick, flashback to 2016 after Trump was elected, when Richard Spencer, the neo-Nazi, him and a room full of they call themselves the alt-right, they're Nazis, started throwing up Zig Heils and Nazi salutes when Trump got elected. Later, as an excuse, he said, well, that was just exuberance. We were caught up in the moment, right? Same excuse here. Although that does not and should not make them any less culpable, it's certainly possible that they traveled to Washington to cosplay a revolt and ended up actually participating in one, being generous there. But it has become disturbingly clear in the weeks since Donald Trump's coup attempt that some of these extremists not only meant business, but came prepared. Militia members reportedly strategized their attack on the Capitol both before it happened and as it played out, with designs on making citizens' arrests of lawmakers. A Texas man who has since been arrested allegedly wanted to assassinate Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Some arrived with zip ties and weapons, apparently intending to kidnap or kill officials, including Representative Nancy Pelosi, former Vice President Mike Pence, who had convened to formalize Joe Biden's win. Quote, "This was more than a group of people swept up in the emotions of the moment," as the Atlantic's David A. Graham put it this month. Within the mob were radicals plotting to kill or kidnap the vice president and members of Congress. As investigators work to determine the scope of the plotting and coordination that went into the attack and potentially whether any members of Congress may have been involved, they have increasingly seemed to point to the Proud Boys, a violent far-right extremist group Trump infamously told to stand back and stand by during a debate with Biden last year. So the Wall Street Journal put out a video, which, I don't want to get, copyright or whatever. So, guys, go find the video that the Wall Street Journal put out about the Proud Boys and the Capitol Hill attack. That shows very clearly the Proud Boys were involved in several of the key moments of escalation in the Capitol Hill attack. Okay. They pushed through barriers. They attacked police officers. They were in communication. They had, earpieces and walkie-talkies and all kinds of stuff like that. And, the right wing is still trying to claim this was Antifa. These Proud Boys were literally chanting as they marched on the Capitol, "Fuck Antifa, fuck Antifa." So, anytime you're faced with that conspiracy theory, you can also bring that up. And again, like, we have this involvement from representatives. New York Times, several GOP members of Congress have links to right-wing extremist groups. Here's Boebert with, one of these characters. Boebert was also tweeting during the attack that the speaker has left the chambers, like letting people know of the whereabouts of Nancy Pelosi. So, these are literally, these guys, if we're going to be, you could call it editorializing because these are legal matters, but these are acts of treason. It's interesting how, it's open season for the right wing to call, Nancy Pelosi a traitor because they do things she doesn't like. But here this Congress member was giving rioters her whereabouts, during an attack on the Capitol. So, according to the New York Times, at least 5 Republican members of Congress have, quote, links to organizations and movements that played a role in the January 6th assault on the Capitol. The Times singled out Representatives Paul Gosar from Arizona, Andy Biggs from Arizona, Lauren Boebert from Colorado, Marjorie Taylor Green from Georgia, and Matt Gaetz from Florida, as lawmakers with, quote, deeper ties to extremist groups who push violent ideas and conspiracy theories, and whose members were prominent among those who stormed the halls of Congress in an attempt to overturn the election results. Guys, that's what we're dealing with. That's what we're seeing here. This is unprecedented. Oh, and look what Marjorie Taylor Green had to say the day after the attack. This is the day after.
I think the greatest message I can have for them is now is the time to pick up the mantle, move it forward, wear your MAGA hat. This isn't going anywhere, not at all. We're only beginning to fight. We are going to defend our Constitution anywhere, not at all. We're only beginning to fight. We are going to defend our Constitution, our freedoms, and we are going to drive as hard as we can to fight for America First policy.
Guys, I don't know. Is that Marie Le Pen? Jesus Christ. I could be wrong about that. But my goodness. Oh, Katie Hopkins. Okay. Another well-known racist. Okay, that's who that is. Jeez. It's hard to keep your racist neo-fascists straight, isn't it? So, guys, I mean, this is nuts. And this brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, but it's all connected. It's all a wash, it seems. The extremism in the right has reached such a fever pitch, such a point that now, like, they're just part of the party. They're in Congress. People who, Boebert claimed she was going to carry a gun into the Capitol and that she dared anyone to stop her. That's how serious she is about open carry. Okay. Jay Coleman comments, the panic buttons removed from the squad's offices. Yeah, Ayanna Pressley, wasn't it? That day proves the institutional bias for me. Yeah, I mean, so we already know the Capitol Hill police. We know how they treated Black Lives Matter. And then we see the kid gloves that they gave to a mob of, anywhere from just hardcore Trump Republicans all the way to white supremacist, neo-Nazi, neo-Confederate, fascist, killers, those wanting to kill members of Congress, which, you can call these people domestic terrorists. I don't think that's unwarranted. Ryan says, so there's a lot of corruption as far as who is in charge and all the counts of votes, crazy politician party members. I don't know what you have to be a little more clear about what you mean by who counts the votes. This is the thing. These people are in Congress because they are in very red districts. These are House districts. There's corruption in the way these districts are drawn. The Republican Party has made sure to control districting and enact gerrymandering all around the United States. If you look at some of these people's districts, they look like all kinds of they're snaking across the map to avoid urban areas where people vote more Democratic. That's long been a mission of the Republican Party, to control districting. And so this has allowed these extremists in very deep red districts to primary, regular Republicans, and now they're in Congress. That's where the corruption lies, a lot of it. But so because of all this, because of the attack on Washington, because of the escalating extremism, it's escalated for years in the Republican, in the American far right, which is now openly embraced by the Republican Party. Keep in mind, it was either the Mississippi or Alabama primary, Donald Trump was asked directly about David Duke, Grand Wizard of the KKK, whether he disavowed David Duke, and Trump very, obviously, well, I've never heard of him. I don't know anything about him. I'm not going to comment on how I don't know anything about him. Only until after the primary and he won in that state did he disavow David Duke. Everybody, every white supremacist, every KKK member, every racist knew exactly what Trump was doing. They knew the game he was playing, okay? So keep in mind that Trumpism very much embraced this extremism. And the KKK has long reigned terror across the American South, right? Using violence, bombing churches, bombing homes of black people, burning churches, hanging people, lynchings, right? I mean, that is a part of the history of America and the American right, okay? And so this is where it gets a little crazy. The Department of Homeland Security, for the first time, issued a security bulletin warning Americans about violence by grievance-fueled domestic terrorists. This is the first time the Department of Homeland Security, which was founded under George W. Bush because of after 9/11, is now warning the country about its own populace. Okay, here we go. this is really unprecedented, and yeah, I mean, there's some caveats I want to add to this, but this is kind of a trip. The Department of Homeland Security issued a warning Wednesday to alert the public about the growing threat of, quote, ideologically motivated violent extremists agitated by President Biden's inauguration and, quote, perceived grievances fueled by false narratives. Guys, if you want to understand the American right wing, get a tattoo of this somewhere you can see. Perceived grievances fueled by false narratives. DHS periodically issues such advisories through its National Terrorism Advisory System, but the warnings have typically been generated by concerns about attacks by foreign governments or radical groups, not domestic extremists. In a statement, the department said the purpose of the new bulletin was to warn the public about a heightened threat environment across the United States, quote, that is likely to persist over the coming weeks. The bulletin is a lesser status warning designed to alert the public about general risks rather than an imminent attack or specific threat. So, keep in mind, so I guess his Biden's press secretary said something that they were going to take action against violent extremism after the Capitol riot. So let me make this clear. As someone on the left, I don't want any new terror laws penned here in America to turn against the populace, because they will obviously be turned against the left, because our federal agencies like the FBI have a long-standing bias against left-wing movements. They, look at COINTELPRO. They assassinated members of the Black Panthers. They were bugging the pulpits at churches where Martin Luther King was going to give speeches. I mean, that is the history of law enforcement and federal law enforcement, and how they focus on left-wing movements. More recently, we obviously saw the way Trump treated Antifa and Black Lives Matter in places like Portland and Seattle, right? Jay Coleman, previous fascist political movements have simply banned centrist leftists from holding office. Yeah, exactly. And notice we just had a far right-wing president who was, sent unbadged federal officers from multiple agencies. He deployed them not just in Washington, D.C., but in Oregon and in Seattle to, beat on, left-wing protesters. And even I did a previous, in one of my previous streams, talked about like poisonous gas being deployed in Portland, gas that was more than just, tear gas, dispersal gas. So this is very troubling. And what makes it even more troubling is that there is, a propaganda networks across the United States of right-wing media. I've done previous reporting about how our local, radio host Andy Caldwell is, making up lies about how Antifa is responsible for the Capitol Hill attack, because, they've lied themselves. The right has lied themselves into this problem. The conservative media has lied itself into this problem. The Republican Party has lied itself into this problem of the base of extremists that it's stirred up like an ant's nest, right? So what are they going to do? They're just going to try to lie their way out of it more. I mean, that's kind of what authoritarianism and fascism, to use with the hard F word, right, is about manipulating people with lies, nationalism, racism, and turning your own populace into the enemy. But now that they obviously attacked the very heart of our government, now they feel victimized by reports like this from the Department of Homeland Security. Let's listen to what propagandist-in-chief Tucker Carlson has to say about this. Listen to this.
The American government is now at war with its own population. Here's CNN's version.
My colleague Jim Sciutto, he's covered international terrorism for 20 years and says that the parallels to the domestic terror threat are frightening. And he points to, and I quote here, radicalization online, demonization of the enemy to justify violence, draw to a cause greater than themselves, devotion to a cultish leader. That said, are we doing enough to combat this threat?
Now, so look at this. This is just Tucker Carlson hate watching CNN. This is now what cable news. This is like YouTube feuds or Twitter feuds between different political personalities. Now the cable channels are now watching each other and going, "Can you believe this?"
The way law enforcement looks at the domestic terror threat now as equal or greater than international terrorism, if we compared that to a U.S. politician propagating Islamist terrorist thought, materials, lies, etc., imagine the reaction. And yet, sadly, there's still a partisan reaction to this. Some denying that the threat is real and that the lie behind the threat is dangerous.
American citizens are more dangerous than foreign terrorists. You often hear people say, oh, Fox is so extreme. The Fox News channel is so extreme. No show on this channel would ever put that on the air, ever. And if anyone did, people would resign in protest because that is completely untrue and completely reckless.
Look at this liar, okay? He's saying that if we ever said American citizens were more dangerous or terroristic, right, we would resign. Liar. Tucker Carlson is a shameless liar. Because guess what? It's not like we don't have examples of this just recently, like within the last year or the last, few months or so. Take a look, guys. Antifa. Trump says group will be designated terrorist organization. This is last year. This is just last year. This is literally as Black Lives Matter flared up and Portland became, the way it was when it all started. The president, the U.S. will designate the anti-fascist group Antifa a terrorist organization, President Donald Trump says. The president accused Antifa of starting riots at street protests over George Floyd's death. Mr. Floyd, blah, blah, blah. We all know what happened to George Floyd. Protests over his death have turned violent. The National Guard, the U.S. Military Reserve Force, has been deployed in 15 states. So, yeah, Trump was totally fine deploying the National Guard that literally shot at people who, were just standing on their front porches telling them to get in their house. So they're okay with authoritarian, and all of that stuff when it's their side doing it. On Twitter, Mr. Trump blamed Antifa-led anarchists and radical left anarchists for the unrest, again, without providing more specifics, right? Guys, look, here's the bill. They wrote the damn bill. Look at this. HRes 279. Calling for the designation of Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization in the Senate of the United States. This is all the way in 2019. They were already on this in 2019. Resolution calling for the designation of Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. Whereas members of Antifa, because they believe that free speech is equivalent to violence, have used threats of violence in the pursuit of suppressing opposing political ideologies. I mean, this is disgusting, ridiculous, and pay attention to the crocodile tears, okay? Did Black Lives Matter or Antifa try to overthrow the cornerstone of our country, our democratic process? Did they attack the Capitol? No, they did not. I'm just talking about the completely shameless hypocrisy of the right wing and the Republicans in this country to say that, how dare they point out the extremism in our party? How dare Homeland Security issue this warning, right, that domestic extremism is on the rise and that people are in danger from the right wing. How dare they? We would never do that. We literally just looked at a bill of them calling, wanting to designate Antifa terrorist organization. And that's what Trump wanted to do.